Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So it's October 11th, 2021, Hillsborough, North Carolina. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 10, Chapter 29, Text 25. Dushilo Durbago Vrido Jado Rogyadano Piva Patistri Bir Nahatavyo Lokek Shubir Apataki. Please chant. Jado Rogyadano Piva Patistri Bir Nahatavyo Lokek Shubir Apataki. All right, so we're going to have quite an expansion on the Western marriage vows. What are the Western marriage vows? In sickness and health. What are the other ones? In Western marriage vows, the typical. Sickness and health, richer and poorer, better or worse, right? I think those are the three. Better, worse, sickness, health, rich, poor. So this Krishna is going to take this to a whole new level here. Dushilaha, of bad character. Durbhagaha, unfortunate. Vridaha, old. Jadaha, retarded. That's not politically correct in 2021. No, it would be intellectually challenged. Jadaha literally means dull, like a stone. Rogi, sickly. Adhana, poor. Apiva, even. Patihi, the husband. Stribihi, by women. Nahatavyaha, should not be rejected. Loka, a good destination in the next life. Ipsubihi, who desire. Apataki, if he is not fallen. So the BBT translation: women who desire a good destination in the next life should never abandon a husband who is not fallen from his religious standards, even if he is obnoxious, unfortunate, old, unintelligent, sickly, or poor. Purport. Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti quotes a similar statement from Smriti Shastra. Patim twapatinam bhajet. One should serve a master who is not fallen. Sometimes the foolish argument is given that even if a husband falls down from spiritual principles, his wife should continue to serve him since he is her, quote, guru. In fact, since Krishna consciousness cannot be subordinated to any other religious principle, a guru who engages his follower in materialistic sinful activities loses his status as a guru. Srila Prabhupada stated that the system of monarchy collapsed in Europe because the monarchs abused and exploited their position. Similarly, in the Western world, men have abused and exploited women, and now there is a popular movement in which women reject the authority of their husbands. Ideally, men should be staunch in spiritual life and give pure, sincere guidance to the women under their care. The gopis, of course, being on the highest platform of spiritual perfection, were transcendental to all positive and negative religious considerations. In other words, they were the eternal lovers of the absolute truth. Dushilo durbago vrido jada ro gyadhano piva patistri bir nahatavyo lok shaped shubir apataki. Women who desire a good destination in the next life should never abandon a husband who has not fallen from his religious standards, even if he is obnoxious, unfortunate, old, unintelligent, sickly, or poor. So we're going to go here to Jiva Goswami. Okay, so this is Jiva Goswami. Oh, expert at giving others instructions, the gopis would say. We have given up our husbands completely. What is the question of serving them? Well, that would be the gopis saying that. But if you should not give up a husband, even if he has bad conduct, such as being a thief, even if he has bad luck, being unsuccessful in his endeavors, durbagaha, even if he is old, incapable of doing actions, jadaha, afflicted with grave disease, or cannot even maintain himself, the word api indicates that each of these items is not a cause of rejection of the husband. The men of Vraja are all endowed with all good qualities. How can they be rejected? A woman who desires good in this and the next life should not do this. If she does, she will suffer in this life and the next. But one should give up a sinful person, one who commits serious sins which cause him to fall down, apataki. Smriti says, patim tva apatitam bhajet. One should worship a husband who is not fallen. Therefore, you should not reject your husbands, Krishna is saying, since none of them have committed sin at all. Though he knows that the gopis have firm attachment to him, he speaks in this manner to increase their longing. Another meaning is as follows. I am actually your husband. As a husband, I do not have any faults, like bad conduct, and therefore should not be rejected. I am endowed with all good qualities and cannot be rejected. These others are filled with faults and are not your husbands. They should be rejected. Okay, so we're going to look at the faults, the faultless, and God, who is above them both. So here, Krishna is going to tell us about two types of people. Dvav imo purusho loke ksharas chakshara eva cha. So ksharas and aksharas. Ksharas sarvani bhutani kutosto kshara uchate. There are two classes of beings, the fallible and the infallible. In the material world, every living entity is fallible, and in the spiritual world, every living entity is called infallible. And then text 17. Uttama purushastvanya paramat meti utarada yo loka trayam avisya bibartyavaya ishvaraha. Besides these two, there is the greatest living personality, the Supreme Soul, the imperishable Lord himself, who has entered the three worlds and is maintaining them. And let's see if... So there's two beings, the fallible and the infallible, and I have a PowerPoint to show too, so that's why I have my computer here. And above them is God. So here Krishna is saying, even if your husband is really fallible, like really, really fallible, like what kind of problems did he mention? He's really old. He's really stupid. He's really sick. He's really poor. He's obnoxious. Right? We have, of course, a story in the Bhagavatam of a woman who married a husband like that. Who was that? Sukanya. She was a princess, and she ended up marrying this really old, really poor, really sick, obnoxious, he wasn't stupid, Chaivana Muni. And she served him very nicely. Yeah, well, he turned into a young husband later by the grace of the Asvinu Kumaras. But, you know, he's my husband. I mean, I know people who've left their spouse for all these things. Yeah? Devotees even. I have a devotee friend, her husband was chronically ill, and she said, I just can't take it, I'm out of here. find a new husband. Nobody, including her guru, could convince her otherwise. She said, I just can't do it. I mean, it's hard. It's hard. Last time I was in New York, a couple years ago, I guess, I ended up meeting some old high school friends, and one of them was telling me how his wife had had a stroke, and it left her physically and mentally disabled, and how difficult it was for him to care for her. He'd become very wealthy. He had hired 24-hour care, but he said, as soon as I get home, my wife wants me to serve her. She won't accept the caregiver. And he said, so as soon as I'm in my own house, I never have a minute to myself. I'm just waiting on my wife hand and foot. And anything we suggest that she could do to improve her situation, she won't do it. All she does is complain constantly. And you could tell that it was a burden to him. He said, well, you know, we've been married for so many years, 40-some years. We've been together since we were 13. What can I do? And it's hard. Yeah. Right? But this is the reality in this world. And the reality in this world is that when we give our complete heart to a fallible being, how do we end up feeling? We give everything to some fallible being. How do we feel? Drained. How else do we feel? I'm going to give everything to some fallible being. Cheated. What else? Frustrated. We feel stupid. Angry. Alone. Bitter. Yeah. And this is the world. And people try to solve it. Well, let me give my heart to another fallible being. Isn't it? All right, well, the person I've given my heart to, they're obnoxious and stupid, so let me find another fallible being, and you find the next fallible being is obnoxious and stupid in another way. Or worse. The midwife I have who delivered my son Keshava, she was married to a drug addict, and she said that it was her second husband. She said her first husband was an alcoholic. And this is like that, isn't it? Right? I mean, and even if you have a spouse or a child or whoever you're giving your heart to who's, you know, beautiful, young, and intelligent and rich, they're still fallible. Isn't it? They're still fallible. They can't fulfill us. They just can't. They don't have the capacity. It's like if you tried to power this temple room with a little AAA battery. The jiva is very small and the jiva is very fallible. And if you give your heart to somebody, you're going to give your heart and soul, all your loyalty to somebody who's fallible. They just don't have the capacity to fulfill you. Nor do we fallible beings have the capacity to fulfill anyone else. Some fallible being cannot be Krishna for me, and I cannot be Krishna for them. So, as far as, you know, peace and tranquility in society, and peace and tranquility for individuals, we say people should be loyal to their spouses for life, even if they're obnoxious or poor or sick, as long as they're not grossly sinful. Grossly sinful, then get out. But this is, Yeah, either way. Men with women, women with men. Krishna's talking to the gopis, but this applies equally to a husband. You know, I have one godbrother whose wife started seeing other men, and even that he tolerated. Then she started bringing the men into the house in front of their children. And he said, that's it. That's goodbye. So, men, women. He's just talking to the gopis. And men should also be faithful to their wives, even if they're obnoxious and sick and poor. Hare Krishna. But this is, this is for peace and stability in society. Peace for individuals, peace for the society. Otherwise, as is explained in the Bhagavad Gita, you have Varna Sankara, you have all these unwanted children, you have all these psychologically messed up people, society falls apart, and so forth and so on. But these relationships are not going to fulfill us because the people are fallible. All right, suppose we have a jiva who's infallible. Krishna says there's the fallible and the infallible. But even a jiva who's infallible is not God. We had a nice question yesterday in our Bhakti Shastri class, because we did first chapter of Bhagavad Gita and the first third of the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, and in the first third of the second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, what very good thing does Arjuna do? He surrenders to Krishna as his guru. We did discuss that it really isn't until chapter 10 that Arjuna says, yes, I accept you as everything. Right? He's still like, from chapter 2 to chapter 10, he still sometimes says, no, what about this? Why are you saying that? Right? And one of the students said, most people when they take initiation, are they at chapter 2 or chapter 10? I said, they're usually at chapter 2. And I usually start at chapter 10. And then they ask the question, sometimes, because Krishna's very heavy with Arjuna in chapter 2, right away, isn't he? He's like, you're a fool. Is it possible to get water? And one of the students asked, sometimes a disciple goes to the guru, and the guru's heavy like that, and then the disciple gets fried and wants to reject the guru. And I said, well, in some cases, the guru may actually be at fault there, but in many other cases, is that the disciple's expecting a relationship from the guru that's not the guru's to do. I said, you don't go to a hardware store to buy flowers. Prabhupada says if you want to be cured from a disease, you don't go to a spiritual master, you go to a doctor. Similarly, if you want someone to put their hand on your shoulder and say, it's okay, it's all right, I know you're having a rough time, it's okay, you go to your buddy. Because when you go to your guru is going to say, you're in Maya. Of course, most of us who act as teachers in some capacity realize it's hard to do that. It's hard to go to a student. The student comes to you, or somebody comes to you, please, Urmila, help me. And I realize most of the time what they really want is for me to say, oh, you're okay. You're okay. Everything will be okay. You're wonderful. Or they want me to, chant some mantra so all their problems will go away. But they very rarely want me to say, hey, this is Tamagun. Remember Krishna, chant Hare Krishna. Take shelter of Krishna, get out of Tamagun. They often get angry. And thank you so much. And often when you give them something to do that will help get them out of Tamagun, they don't do it. So even with the infallible is not Janaka Janani Daita Tanai Prabhu Gurus Pati Tuhu Sarva Moy. Even an infallible jiva is not God. So if we really want to go to the perfect person, we have to go above the fallible and the infallible, which is what the gopis are doing. And Jiva Goswami says that, Krishna. Jiva Goswami says that the Lord is faultless. Now, it's interesting that that's the commentary of Jiva Goswami, because we're going to look at some other commentary of Jiva Goswami. And, sorry, it's popping up with some stupid thing here and driving me nuts. I'm going to try this again. Don't pop up again, please. Thank you. All right, so this is in the section of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu where Rupa Goswami is listing Krishna's qualities. You're all familiar with that? The list of 64 qualities? And Rupa Goswami is giving that as, for those of you who are interested in the technicalities, as part of the Vibhava, Alambana, Vishaya. Although they can also be Udipana. I'm not going to explain that now, but just if you're interested. So Rupa Goswami gives these 64 qualities. And then one might ask, what about faults? So he also says Krishna is free from faults. So these are the faults. Bewilderment, sleep, error, material attachment without prema, material lust, which brings suffering, fickleness, intoxication, envy, violence, exhaustion, toil, lying, anger, hankering, worry, absorption in worldly affairs, prejudice, and dependency on others. Okay, let's look at Madhurya Kadambini of Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, 8th shower. He says, the scriptures proclaim that the Lord's qualities are absolutely free from these discrepancies. Occasionally, Kripa Shakti arranges the display of some of these discrepancies in the dealings of Krishna, Rama, and so on, and the devotees then perceive them. By the ingenuity of Kripa Shakti, however, these same faults are transformed from banality to divine magnificence. Now, in ordinary life, in order to live and work closely with another human being, as far as I can see, we pretty much have to reframe their faults as good qualities, or we can't work with them. If you're living or working very closely with another human being, the only way to do that is when you see all their faults and discrepancies, either you reinterpret them as good qualities, or you just say, well, I'm not going to pay much attention to them. I'm just going to focus on the good qualities, isn't it? And if you don't like someone, you do the reverse. And when people go from liking to not liking, they switch that. Have you noticed that? Like you're married to someone and you reframe all their faults, and then you get divorced from them, and then you reframe them back to faults. That's usually how it works. So, but with Krishna, his so-called faults are actually good qualities, and because he's complete, Om Purnamada Purnamidan, he has, of these 18 faults, 16 of them in a perfect form. 2 of them he doesn't have at all. And this is the commentary of Jiva Goswami. He discusses this in his Priti Sandarbha, 117 to 144. We're not going to be quoting from that, but if you want further reference, you can find it there. We're going to be looking here just at Jiva Goswami's commentary on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 2.1.248, where he goes through all of 16 of the 18 faults and describes them as good qualities. And when I first read this, I was just so thrilled, and I like, wow, this is really wonderful. So he quotes from Bhagavatam 10:77-31. How can lamentation, bewilderment, material affection, or fear, all born out of ignorance, be ascribed to the infinite Supreme Lord, whose perception, knowledge, and power are all similarly infinite? In other words, how can he have any faults? But Jiva Goswami says, due to the devotees' prema, they see these apparent faults in Krishna as good qualities. And due to the prema of Krishna for his devotees, they are actually good qualities. So let's look at them. Bewilderment. So here Jiva Goswami is quoting from 10:13-16 of the Bhagavatam. That when Krishna couldn't find the calves, he went to the bank of the river, and there he couldn't find the cowherd boys. And he was looking for the calves and boys, as if he didn't know what had happened. So this is Krishna's bewilderment, but it's bewilderment in love. He's not really bewildered. But out of love for the boys and the calves, he appears to be bewildered. Then sleep, exhaustion, and toil. And Jiva Goswami quotes from 10:15-16, that sometimes Lord Krishna grew tired from fighting, that's mock fighting with the boys, and lay down at the base of a tree, resting upon a bed made of soft twigs and buds, and using the lap of a cowherd friend as his pillow. So this kind of sleeping is a pastime, right? The Lord also sleeps to create the material world, isn't it? And he has times during the Astakalila Lila when they're apparently sleeping. This, I think, is so funny. Error. So we see this with little children, right? A very young child, they're very short. And we'll see, like in a big kirtan, a little child will just grab onto a sari. You've all seen this? Thinking it's the mother. And then they look up at the devotee's face and see it's not the mother, and they cry. So Krishna and Balaram used to do this too. It said they used to follow the people as if going to their mothers, but when they saw they were other people, they became afraid and returned to their real mothers. So this is Bhagavatam 10:8-22. So they would make a mistake, they'd make an error. But again, this was so loving and charming to all of the older gopis. And then this is one of the faults that Krishna does not have, material attachment. Attachment without prema does not exist in the spiritual realm. Krishna does not have this in any form. Same with material lust. Material lust, which brings grief, also does not exist. In Krishna, it's only prema. Fickleness. And Maharaj always talks about how when he first read Krishna book, he loved reading about this from 10:8-29. How Krishna is taking the butter and yogurt and he's feeding it to the monkeys. And when the monkeys won't have any more, he breaks the pots. Right? And when he can't find any butter or milk to steal, he pinches the babies. And then when the babies start crying, he goes away. But again, this is charming. It fills all the inhabitants of Vraja with so much love, seeing this fickleness of little child Krishna. Then intoxication from 10:35-24. As Krishna respectfully greets his well-wishing friends, his eyes roll slightly as if from intoxication. He wears a flower garland, and the beauty of his soft cheeks is accentuated by the brilliance of his golden earrings and the whiteness of his face, which has the color of a badara berry. Yes, he also drinks honey wine, and there's a lot of Balaram pastimes with intoxication. Envy from 10:25-16. By my mystic power, I will completely counteract this disturbance caused by Indra. Demigods like Indra are proud of their opulence, and out of foolishness, they falsely consider themselves the Lord of the universe. I will now destroy such ignorance. For violence, Jiva Goswami doesn't give a specific quote. He says there's lots of them. So lots and lots of times here I've shown Krishna killing Aristasura, Keshi, and fighting with the demigods, and the battle about Banasura. Lying. 10:8-35. My dear mother, I've never eaten dirt. All my friends complaining against me are liars. If you think they're being truthful, you can directly look into my mouth and examine it. And another lying when Krishna and the Pandavas disguise themselves as brahmanas to fight with Jarasandha. For anger, Jiva Goswami says there's lots of examples. He doesn't give any specific ones. And I really liked it when I found these pictures that in each one of them, the Lord has his hand in this same position. Right here with Kamsa, with Jagai and Madai, with Bhishma. Hankering. When Mother Yasoda was churning butter and Krishna wanted to drink her breast milk, he caught hold of the churning rod. Now, this is in 10:9-4. These are all the examples that Jiva Goswami gives in his commentary. Worry from 10:13-17. When Krishna couldn't find the boys and the calves anywhere, he understood it was the work of Brahma, and he was worried. Oh, and this one. How fortunate we are that Krishna has this apparent fault. Absorption in worldly affairs is shown in having the desire to maintain the universe. Thank you, Krishna. for wanting to be willing to be absorbed in the affairs of this world and take care of us. Prejudice. This is from Bhagavad Gita 9:29. Krishna says, I don't favor anyone, I don't envy anyone, but anyone who renders service unto me is a friend, is in me, and I am also a friend to him. Dependency on others. So here I put in a picture of Chirkor Gopinath. And Jiva's quoting 9:463 about Maharaj Ambarish, where Vishnu is talking to Durvasa. I'm completely under the control of my devotees. Indeed, I am not at all independent. Because my devotees are completely devoid of material desires, I sit only within the core of their hearts. What to speak of my devotees, even those who are devotees of my devotees are very dear to me. So to summarize these faults, lamentation, bewilderment, and material affection and fear, when they originate from ignorance, are definitely not present in the Lord. However, lamentation, bewilderment, material affection, and fear, when they originate from knowledge, do exist in the Lord. So where are we going to give our everything? To the fallible, to the infallible, or to the one supreme person who's above it all? And so when Krishna says to the gopis, go home and give your hearts to the fallible, they're like, no. You're the husband. We're giving our hearts to you, the one supreme person who can actually fulfill all desires. Nitya Nityanam, Chaitanya Chaitanam, Eko Bahunam Yo Vidadati Kaman. You are the real husband. You are the real proprietor. You are the real enjoyer. Bhoktaram Yagatapasam Sarvaloka Maheshram Suridam Sarvabhutanam Gyatramam Shanti Vichati. Questions, comments, additions, subtractions, chastisements? Yes, Maharaj. Yes, in fact, those are the next two slides that I didn't show. That sometimes the devotees also apparently exhibit these faults. Yes, and the example that Jiva Goswami gives is of Sukadev Goswami, who, while he's reciting the Bhagavatam, temporarily becomes bewildered in ecstasy and has to kind of collect himself before he can continue speaking. Yes, yes. So Jiva mentions that the pure devotees also sometimes apparently show these faults in prema. Yeah. He gives that one example, but he makes that point. Yes, Sir Denny. Oh, you're welcome. Well, thank you. Well, I talked a little bit about Krishna's point about serving the husbands in this world. It actually, it was interesting. You know, I started looking at this verse yesterday morning after Drishta Prabhu's class. And, you know, thinking, because the BBT purport is mostly focused on women don't have to serve fallen husbands. You know, if he's really fallen, you can get out. And I was thinking about giving, you know, a class from a sociological point of view, you know, which was the way the BBT purport was going. And I was kind of going back and forth on it. And it was actually kind of late in the day yesterday that was like, oh, Bhagavad Gita 15, 16, 17. Yes, that's right. Absolutely. Thank you.